What if the biggest reason people struggle with the CCAT is not that the questions are too difficult, but that they simply run out of time? Spatial reasoning questions can look simple at first, but without the right approach, they can quickly become a major time trap. In this complete CCAT preparation course, we will work through all 6 sections and build the skills you need to approach the exam with confidence. In this first section, we will focus on spatial reasoning, including 2-dimensional shapes, rotations, and the patterns you are likely to see on the exam. I will show you practical shortcuts that can help you recognize the correct answer faster without wasting valuable time. I have also included a free CCAT study guide with some of the most important questions and preparation tips in the description, so make sure you check it out. And honestly, watch the complete video because each section builds an important skill, and in the end, I will share how you can prepare smarter and make it much easier to pass the CCAT exam. Spatial reasoning on the CCAT measures your ability to mentally manipulate shapes and visualize how objects relate to each other in space. Employers value this skill because it reflects your general problem-solving speed and your capacity to understand new, complex information quickly. You will not need any prior mathematical knowledge for this section, just a structured way of looking at images. Think of it as a mental workout where you are learning to rotate and flip puzzle pieces inside your head. Once you grasp the basic rules, these questions become some of the easiest to solve on the test. Before we dive into specific shape rules, we must talk about the environment of the CCAT exam itself. You only have 15 minutes to answer 50 questions across all categories, which means you have roughly 18 seconds per question. Because spatial reasoning questions do not require calculation or heavy reading, they are your best opportunity to save precious time. If you can answer a spatial question in 10 seconds, you just banked extra time for a difficult math problem later. Therefore, our goal here is not just accuracy, but lightning-fast visual recognition. One of the most common spatial question types asks you to identify an exact match for a given shape among a lineup of slightly altered options. The trick here is that the incorrect options will often be flipped like a mirror image or stretched just slightly out of proportion. To beat this, you must train yourself not to look at the whole shape all at once. Looking at the entire image overwhelms the brain and makes the shapes blur together under time pressure. Instead, you need to focus on a single defining feature of the target shape. The best way to evaluate matching shapes is to use the anchor point technique. Choose one specific corner, an odd angle, or an asymmetrical curve on the target shape and use it as your anchor point. Once you have this anchor point locked in your mind, quickly scan the answer choices looking only at that specific detail. You will find that 2 or 3 answer choices instantly fail the test because that one specific corner or angle is pointing the wrong way. By focusing on one small detail, you bypass the confusion intended by the test makers. Another major element of CCAT spatial reasoning involves mental rotation, where you must find a shape that is identical to the target shape but rotated by some degree. Many candidates struggle here because they try to rotate the entire complex image in their head at once. A better approach is to draw an imaginary line through the longest part of the shape, treating it like an axis or a hand on a clock. When you visualize this central line moving like a clock hand, the rest of the shape easily follows along in your mind. This simplifies the rotation process immensely. When dealing with rotation, it is crucial to understand the difference between rotating a shape and flipping a shape. Rotating a shape means turning it in a circle without lifting it off the page, preserving its fundamental orientation. Flipping a shape is like turning over a pancake, which creates a mirror image that can never match the original no matter how much you rotate it. The CCAT will constantly try to trick you by offering mirror images disguised as rotated shapes. You must always confirm that the shape has only been turned, not flipped. To quickly spot a flipped image, you can use a mental trick called the right-hand rule. Imagine placing your right hand flat over a specific side of the target shape, noting which way the shape extends relative to your thumb. If you apply this same mental hand to an answer choice and the shape now extends toward your pinky finger instead, the image has been flipped. This visualization takes only seconds to perform, but completely protects you from the most common spatial trap on the exam. You will start catching these mirror images almost instantly with a little practice. Beyond matching and rotating, you will also encounter visual series questions where you must predict the next shape in a sequence. These sequences are essentially visual patterns, and they follow strict, predictable rules that you can decode. The key to solving a visual series is to track the movement of just one element at a time, rather than trying to comprehend the entire sequence at once. For example, if a box contains a black dot and a white square, ignore the white square completely at first and track only the path of the black dot across the sequence. As you track a single element like a dot across a sequence, you need to determine its specific rule of movement. The element might be moving clockwise around the corners of a square, or it might be alternating between the top and bottom of the frame. Count the steps it takes between each frame, noting if it moves one space, two spaces, or follows a growing pattern like one space, then two spaces. Once you figure out the rule for that single element, you can immediately eliminate any answer choices that place the dot in the wrong final position. After you have eliminated answer choices based on the first element, you repeat the process with the second element, such as the white square. The second element will always have its own distinct rule of movement, completely independent of the first element. It might be rotating by 90 degrees each time or changing its size from large to small. By combining the known final position of the first element with the known final position of the second element, you will find that only one correct answer remains. This methodical, step-by-step tracking guarantees high accuracy. The CCAT also tests your ability to mentally combine or subtract shapes from one another. You might be shown two separate symbols and asked what they would look like if stacked directly on top of each other. The secret to these combining questions is to focus heavily on the overlapping lines. Look for where the lines of the first shape will cross or completely cover the lines of the second shape. Eliminating answers that contain extra lines, or answers that are missing these critical intersections, is the fastest way to find the correct hybrid shape. Another common spatial question type asks you to identify the odd one out among 5 different shapes. In these problems, 4 of the images share a common underlying logic, while 1 breaks the rule. The challenge is that the shapes might look completely different at first glance, meaning the rule is not based on how they look, but on their structural properties. You must quickly analyze the number of sides, the types of angles, or the symmetry of each shape. Do not just look at the shapes, but actively count their structural features. When solving odd one out puzzles, always start by counting the straight lines or the corners of every shape presented. Very often, 4 shapes will have an even number of sides, like 4, 6, and 8, while the odd one out will have a 5-sided pentagon structure. If counting sides does not reveal a pattern, look for intersecting lines and count how many times the lines cross each other. Moving straight into analytical counting prevents you from staring blankly at the images and wasting precious exam time hoping a pattern magically appears. If numerical counting fails to reveal the odd one out, your next immediate check should be symmetry. Mentally draw a line down the exact center of each shape to see if the left side perfectly mirrors the right side. The CCAT frequently builds odd one out questions where 4 shapes are perfectly symmetrical, while the 5th shape has a slight, deliberate distortion. Symmetry is a very fast visual check that you can perform in seconds, making it an excellent fallback strategy when standard line counting does not provide a clear answer. You will also face visual matrix questions, which are essentially a tic-tac-toe grid of shapes with 1 square missing. These are logical puzzles where relationships exist both horizontally across the rows and vertically down the columns. The mistake most test takers make is looking at the entire grid chaotically. You must choose to read the grid purely left to right, or purely top to bottom, to isolate the pattern. A common matrix rule is that the 3rd shape in a row is simply the first and second shapes merged together. Across all these spatial question types, the test makers love to include distracting details designed to confuse your eyes. They might add complex shading, useless squiggly lines, or background grids that have absolutely nothing to do with the actual pattern. You must train yourself to identify what is actually changing between frames and actively ignore what stays the same. If a background grid never moves or changes color throughout a sequence, your brain must learn to filter it out completely so you can focus on the moving parts. It is important to know that spatial reasoning requires a high amount of cognitive energy, and visual fatigue is a real factor on the CCAT. Staring intensely at geometric shapes while the clock ticks down can make your vision feel blurry or crossed. To combat this, Practice glancing away from the screen for just half a second between questions to reset your visual focus. Blinking intentionally and taking a tiny micro break allows your brain to process the next set of shapes with fresh clarity rather than carrying over stress from the last puzzle. Finally, because time is your most valuable asset on the CCAT, you must know when to abandon a difficult spatial question. If you have applied the anchor point technique, tracked the moving elements, and checked for symmetry, but you still cannot see the pattern after 20 seconds, you must guess and move on. There is no penalty for wrong answers on the CCAT, so you must never leave a question blank. Guessing on one confusing shape puzzle might give you the time needed to confidently answer 3 easier questions later in the exam. Congratulations on completing this foundational section on CCAT spatial reasoning. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached practice test right now to lock in these new visual skills. Taking the time to apply these techniques to practice questions will dramatically improve your memory retention and your overall exam readiness. Remember that the practice test is completely included with this lesson, so take advantage of it to measure your progress. Stay focused, embrace the active learning process, and I will see you in the next section where we tackle verbal ability. Welcome to the second section of our course, where we will focus on mastering CCAT verbal ability. In this lesson, you will learn how to quickly solve vocabulary challenges, decode word relationships, and analyze logical statements. This topic is highly important because verbal questions can be answered in just a few seconds if you know the hidden patterns, saving you massive amounts of time for the harder math questions. I am thrilled to show you these simple language tricks so you can confidently tackle any word puzzle they throw at you. Prepare yourself to unlock the logic behind the language and dramatically increase your testing speed. The verbal ability section of the CCAT is not just a simple spelling or grammar test. It is designed to evaluate how efficiently you process written information and understand the relationships between different ideas. Employers care about this because clear communication and reading comprehension are critical skills for almost every professional job. You will be tested on your ability to quickly draw conclusions from text and identify subtle differences in meaning. Think of this section as a test of your mental agility using words instead of shapes. One of the most frequent question types you will face asks you to identify the antonym, or the exact opposite, of a specific target word. This sounds incredibly simple, but the exam uses challenging vocabulary to confuse you. The best strategy here is to briefly cover the answer choices with your hand, or just look away from them for a second. Try to define the target word in your own simple terms first, and then think of your own basic opposite. Once you have your own simple opposite in mind, scan the answers for a word that matches your idea. There is a very common psychological trap hidden inside these antonym questions that you must avoid. The test makers will almost always include a direct synonym, or a word with the same meaning, in the list of answer choices. Under extreme time pressure, your brain naturally wants to match related words together, making it highly tempting to accidentally select the synonym. You must actively remind yourself to look for the opposite every single time you read the prompt. Staying focused on the word opposite will save you from making silly mistakes. You will inevitably encounter vocabulary words on the exam that you have never seen before in your life. When this happens, do not panic, because you can often decode the meaning by looking at the roots and prefixes of the word. A prefix is the short set of letters at the very beginning of a word that gives a clue about its meaning. For example, words starting with the prefix mal usually relate to something bad, while words starting with bene usually relate to something good. Knowing just a few common prefixes can help you guess the general direction of an unknown word. Building on the prefix trick, you can use the word charge strategy to answer difficult vocabulary questions quickly. The charge strategy simply means labeling the target word as either positive, negative, or neutral. If the question asks for the opposite of a deeply negative word, you immediately know the correct answer must be a positive word. You can instantly eliminate any negative answer choices without even knowing their exact dictionary definitions. This brilliant shortcut can turn a confusing 5-choice question into a simple 50-50 guess in mere seconds. Another major component of the verbal section is the analogy, which tests your ability to find parallel relationships between concepts. Analogies are essentially mathematical equations built out of words, often formatted like tree is to forest as star is to what. Your goal is to identify the exact connection between the first pair of words and apply that same connection to the second pair. These questions evaluate your critical thinking and your ability to see how different elements interact in the real world. Mastering analogies is all about finding the hidden bridge between the words. To solve analogy questions flawlessly, you should always use the bridge sentence technique. You simply create a short, logical sentence that perfectly connects the first two words together. Using our previous example, your bridge sentence would be, a tree is a small part of a larger forest. You then take the third word, star, and plug it into the exact same sentence structure. A star is a small part of a larger galaxy, making galaxy the clear and undeniably correct answer. To build your bridge sentences even faster, it helps to memorize the most common relationship categories used on the CCAT. Test makers reuse the same few analogy patterns over and over again. These include part to whole, cause and effect, a tool and the worker who uses it, or a changing degree of intensity. For instance, a tap is a light touch, while a smash is an intense touch, which represents the degree of intensity pattern. Recognizing these standard categories allows you to build your mental bridge instantly. When working with analogies, you must pay extreme attention to directionality. Directionality means the order of the words in your bridge sentence must perfectly match the order of the words in the answer choice. If the original pair gives you the tool first and the worker second, the correct answer must also list the tool first and the worker second. The test will frequently try to trick you by providing a perfect relationship in the answer choices, but backwards. Always double-check that the flow of your sentence moves in the correct direction. You will also encounter syllogisms, which are logic puzzles cleverly disguised as reading comprehension questions. A syllogism gives you 2 or 3 factual statements and asks you to determine what conclusion must logically be true based on those facts. These questions are designed to test your deductive reasoning and your ability to follow strict logical rules. The most important rule for syllogisms is that you must accept the provided statements as absolute truth. Even if the statement says all apples are blue, you must believe it for the sake of the puzzle. The biggest mistake test takers make on syllogisms is bringing their own outside knowledge into the question. Your brain will naturally try to use real-world logic to find the answer, but this will almost always lead you into a trap. If the text does not explicitly state a fact, you cannot assume it is true, no matter how obvious it seems in reality. You have to operate like a computer, processing only the specific data given to you on the screen. Ignoring your common sense is surprisingly difficult, but it is necessary for these specific questions. The most effective way to solve a syllogism is to quickly visualize a mental Venn diagram. Imagine drawing overlapping circles in your head to represent the different groups of items mentioned in the text. If the text says all managers are leaders, you picture a small circle for managers completely inside a larger circle for leaders. This simple visualization instantly clarifies the relationships and exposes any false conclusions hidden in the answer choices. It turns a confusing word puzzle into a simple picture that is easy to understand. When reading logical statements, you must strictly distinguish between absolute words and qualified words. Absolute words include terms like always, never, all, and none, which leave zero room for exceptions. Qualified words include terms like sometimes, most, some, and few, which indicate that exceptions do exist. If the original text only uses qualified words like some, you can automatically eliminate any answer choices that use absolute words like always. This simple keyword check prevents you from making assumptions that the text does not actually support. Sentence completion questions are another common challenge, where you must fill in a blank space to make a sentence logically sound. These questions test both your vocabulary and your ability to use context clues from the surrounding text. The best approach is to read the entire sentence, leaving a pause for the blank space, and predict your own word before looking at the options. Doing this forces you to understand the flow and meaning of the sentence independently. Once you have a predicted word, finding a matching synonym in the choices becomes very easy. The secret to mastering sentence completion is hunting for transition words, which act as massive directional clues. Transition words like however, although, despite, and but signal a change in direction, meaning the second half of the sentence will contrast the first half. Conversely, words like furthermore, similarly, and consequently tell you that the sentence will continue in the same logical direction. Identifying these transition words instantly tells you whether you are looking for a positive or negative word to fill the blank. They are the traffic signals of reading comprehension. You should also recognize that reading comprehension is secretly tested inside the math word problems later in the exam. Many intelligent students fail numerical questions not because their math was wrong, but because they misread a single critical word. Words like exactly, approximately, except, and not completely change the mathematical formula you need to use. Treating every math problem as a verbal reading test first will save you from deeply frustrating errors. Slow down for just a fraction of a second during the reading phase to guarantee accuracy. Ultimately, the verbal section of the CCAT measures your raw attention to detail under immense pressure. Employers use this score to determine if you are someone who will catch a small but critical error in an important email, contract, or report. By treating every single word as a valuable piece of evidence, you train your brain to operate with high-level professional accuracy. These questions are not designed to trick you unfairly, but to see if you can remain completely focused when overwhelmed. Detail orientation is a skill you can easily sharpen with practice. Time management on the verbal section is very different from the other sections because there is no complicated math to work through. You generally either know the vocabulary word, can figure it out using the prefix trick, or you do not know it at all. If you have spent 15 seconds on a verbal question and still cannot see the logic, you must guess immediately and move forward. Agonizing over an unknown word is a terrible waste of time that you desperately need for the complex numerical puzzles. Be decisive, trust your quick reasoning, and keep moving. Congratulations on completing this highly important section on mastering CCAT verbal ability. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached practice test right now to solidify these new language strategies in your mind. Working through these practice questions immediately will drastically improve your long-term retention and overall exam readiness. Remember that the practice test is fully included with this lesson, so dive in and test your skills. Keep up this excellent active learning, and I look forward to seeing you in the next section where we will conquer numerical reasoning. Welcome back to the third section of our course where we dive into essential numerical reasoning and word problems. In this lesson, you will learn how to confidently solve fractions, percentages, and everyday business math without touching a calculator. This topic is incredibly important because quantitative questions make up a massive portion of your overall score, and many candidates panic when they see numbers. I am excited to show you simple mental math shortcuts that will completely change how you approach numerical puzzles. Get ready to build your mathematical confidence and speed through these questions with ease. The numerical reasoning section of the CCAT does not test high-level algebra or complex calculus. Instead, it measures your ability to perform basic, practical math quickly in your head. Employers want to know that you can calculate a quick discount, understand a basic budget, or estimate a profit margin on the fly during a meeting. Because calculators are strictly forbidden on this exam, the real challenge is managing your time. Your success relies entirely on memorizing a few basic rules and learning how to estimate rapidly. To dramatically increase your speed, you must start trusting your mental math skills instead of writing every single step on scratch paper. Writing out basic addition or long division by hand burns precious seconds that you simply do not have. You should immediately refresh your memory of the basic multiplication tables up to 12, as well as the squares of numbers up to 15. Having these common numbers memorized means you will instantly recognize patterns without needing to calculate them from scratch. This basic preparation is your first major step toward numerical speed. One of the most powerful strategies for numerical reasoning is mastering the art of estimation. Very often, the answer choices provided on the exam are spaced very far apart from each other. If a question asks for the exact product of 49 and 31, do not waste time doing the exact math. Instead, round the numbers to 50 and 30, quickly multiply them in your head to get 1500, and look for the answer closest to that number. Estimation allows you to bypass tedious calculations and jump straight to the correct answer. Fractions frequently appear on the test, and they often cause unnecessary anxiety for test takers. The best way to handle a fraction is to visualize it simply as a piece of a pie, representing a part of a whole. When you see a fraction like 3/4, do not just see numbers on a page, but picture an object divided into 4 equal slices, where you possess 3 of them. This visual approach prevents you from getting lost in abstract rules and keeps your logic grounded in the real world. You will save a tremendous amount of time if you memorize the percentage equivalents of the most common fractions. For example, you should instantly know that 1/2 is 50%, 1/4 is 25%, and 1/5 is 20%. You should also memorize that 1/3 is approximately 33%. When a word problem asks you to find 20% of a number, you can simply divide that number by 5 instead of doing messy decimal multiplication. Converting percentages back into simple fractions is a massive time-saving shortcut. Percentages represent real-world business scenarios, like calculating sales taxes, markups, or discounts. The absolute fastest way to find any percentage is to use the 10% trick. To find 10% of any number, you simply move the decimal point 1 space to the left. For example, 10% of 450 is exactly 45. Once you can find 10% instantly, you possess the master key to unlocking almost any other percentage the test might ask you to calculate. Let us explore how the 10% trick helps you find more complicated numbers like 15 or 20%. If you need 20% of a number, simply find 10% by moving the decimal, and then double that amount in your head. If you need 15%, find the 10%, cut that number in half to get 5%, and add the two pieces together. Breaking complex percentages down into simple building blocks of tens and fives turns stressful multiplication into very easy addition. Ratios are another critical concept, and they simply compare the relationship between two different groups. If a company has a ratio of 2 managers for every 5 employees, you write this as 2:5. The most common mistake candidates make is confusing the parts with the whole total. In this example, the group size is actually 7 people total, because you add the 2 managers and the 5 employees together. Always remember to add the parts of a ratio together to understand the total size of the group. When you encounter a ratio problem, the easiest way to solve it is using the scaling method. Imagine that same 2:5 ratio of managers to employees, but the word problem tells you there are actually 50 employees in total. You simply ask yourself what number you multiply by 5 to reach 50, which is 10. You then multiply the 2 managers by that exact same scale of 10, revealing that there are 20 managers. Scaling ratios up or down using simple multiplication solves these problems flawlessly every time. Word problems are heavily featured on the CCAT, and they are essentially reading comprehension tests disguised as math questions. Test makers intentionally use confusing sentence structures to hide very simple arithmetic. Your primary goal is to carefully translate the English language words into mathematical symbols. For example, the word is almost always translates to an equal sign, while the word of almost always translates to a multiplication sign. Learning this basic translation guide will help you build mathematical formulas directly out of the text. A major trap hidden inside word problems is the inclusion of completely useless extra information. A question might tell you about a train leaving a station at 3 o'clock, traveling at 60 miles per hour, with 40 passengers on board, and ask how far it travels in 2 hours. The number of passengers is just distracting noise meant to confuse your formula. You must actively hunt for the actual question being asked, and deliberately ignore any numbers that do not directly help you solve that specific question. Averages, also known as the mean, are a staple of numerical reasoning tests. The standard way to find an average is to add all the numbers together and divide by how many numbers there are. However, if the numbers are very large, this takes far too long. A faster trick is to pick a round number perfectly in the middle of the group as your guess, and just look at how far the other numbers differ from your guess. Balancing the differences is much faster than adding huge numbers together from scratch. You will frequently encounter motion problems involving distance, rate, and time. The only formula you need to memorize here is that distance equals rate multiplied by time. If a car drives at 50 miles per hour for 3 hours, you multiply 50 by 3 to find the total distance of 150 miles. The test might give you the distance and the time, asking you to work backwards to find the rate using division. As long as you know this one simple triangle formula, you can solve any motion problem easily. Work rate problems often confuse test takers, such as when one machine takes 2 hours to complete a job, and another takes 3 hours. Candidates often mistakenly add the hours together, assuming the machines working together will take 5 hours, which makes no logical sense. When things work together, the total time must be less than the fastest individual time. The secret trick is to multiply the two times together, and then divide by the sum of the two times. This specific formula solves combined work problems instantly without complex fractions. Basic business terminology is also tested in the quantitative section, specifically involving profit and loss. You must understand that revenue is the total amount of money brought in, while cost is the money spent to produce the item. Profit is simply what is left over when you subtract the cost from the revenue. Many word problems will ask you to calculate the profit margin, which means they just want you to find what percentage the profit is compared to the original cost. Knowing these basic definitions prevents you from freezing up. Probability and basic combinations occasionally appear, usually involving pulling colored marbles out of a bag. Probability is just a simple fraction where the top number is the specific thing you want to happen, and the bottom number is the total number of possible outcomes. If a bag has 3 red marbles and 7 blue marbles, the probability of picking red is 3 out of 10 total marbles. Always remember to add everything together to find that bottom total number first before calculating the final chance. Because the CCAT moves so incredibly fast, time management on word problems is absolutely critical. Some word problems require 3 or 4 separate calculations to reach the final answer. If you read a problem and realize it will take a minute or more to set up the equation, you must guess and skip it immediately. Earning 1 point on a 5-minute math problem is a terrible strategy when you could have earned 3 points on easier verbal questions in that same amount of time. Always prioritize the fast wins. The best way to improve your numerical reasoning is to practice translating words into math every single day. Do not just look at a question and guess, but actively write down the formula you are building from the text. Over time, this translation process becomes automatic, and you will stop fearing the paragraphs of text. Math is highly predictable, and the CCAT uses the exact same types of word problems year after year. Once you learn the underlying formulas, the test makers cannot surprise you anymore. Congratulations on completing this highly valuable section on essential numerical reasoning and word problems. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached practice test right now to apply these math shortcuts immediately. Completing practice questions is the absolute best way to improve your retention and guarantee your true exam readiness. Remember that the practice test is fully included with this lesson, so take out some scratch paper and dive right in. Keep up this active learning momentum, and I will see you in the next section where we tackle advanced logical reasoning. Welcome to the 4th section of our course where we will master advanced logical reasoning and number series. In this lesson, you will learn how to decode complex number patterns, solve ordering puzzles, and navigate advanced logic conditions. This topic is incredibly important because these questions separate average scores from top-tier scores by testing your analytical endurance. I am excited to show you the hidden rules behind these sequences so you can solve them predictably every single time. Prepare yourself to unlock the matrix of numbers and take your logical thinking to the next level. Number series questions present you with a line of numbers and ask you to identify the next logical number in the sequence. The biggest secret to solving these quickly is realizing that the specific numbers on the screen do not actually matter. What truly matters is the hidden relationship, or the gap, between each of those numbers. Your primary goal is to act like a detective and figure out the exact mathematical rule that creates those gaps. Once you find the underlying rule, finding the final answer is simply a matter of basic arithmetic. The absolute first step you must take with any number series is calculating the first-level differences. You do this by quickly subtracting the first number from the second from the third, and writing those differences down. In many CCAT questions, this simple step will instantly reveal a basic pattern, such as adding 3 every time or subtracting 5 every time. By making a habit of finding these primary gaps immediately, you will solve half of the number series questions in less than 10 seconds. If calculating the first-level differences does not reveal an obvious pattern, you must immediately move to the second-level differences. This simply means finding the mathematical gaps between the gaps you just wrote down. For example, if your first-level gaps are 2, 4, 6, and 8, the second-level gap is a constant addition of 2. Test makers love using second-level differences because they create a sequence that looks completely random at first glance, but actually follows a very strict and simple hidden rule. When you see a number series where the values are growing incredibly fast, you can immediately stop looking for an addition rule. Rapid growth is a massive clue that the sequence is driven by a multiplication rule. If a sequence goes from 3 to 12 to 48, the numbers are escalating too quickly for simple addition, meaning the rule is multiplying by 4. Recognizing this visual clue of rapid expansion saves you time because you instantly know which mathematical tool to use. Sometimes you will encounter an alternating series, which is actually two completely separate patterns woven together into one line. You can spot an alternating series when the numbers bounce up and down chaotically, such as increasing, then decreasing, then increasing again. To solve this, you simply skip every other number, treating the first, third, and fifth numbers as one pattern, and the second, fourth, and sixth numbers as another. Splitting the sequence apart instantly removes the chaos and reveals two very simple rules. You must also be prepared to recognize the famous Fibonacci sequence pattern, which is a favorite trick of exam creators. In this specific type of series, you do not add a constant number, but instead, you add the two previous numbers together to get the next number. For example, the sequence 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 is created because 1 plus 2 is 3, and 2 plus 3 is 5. If standard gaps and multiplication do not work, always check if adding the previous two numbers unlocks the pattern. Another common trick is building a sequence based entirely on perfect squares or perfect cubes. You should already have the basic perfect squares like 4, 9, 16, and 25 memorized from our numerical reasoning lesson. Test makers will often take this list of perfect squares and simply add 1 or subtract 1 from every number to hide the pattern. If you see a sequence like 3, 8, 15, and 24, you should recognize that these are just perfect squares with 1 subtracted from each. Occasionally, the CCAT will present a number series using fractions, which often causes test takers to freeze in panic. The easiest way to handle a fraction series is to completely ignore the fact that they are fractions. You simply treat the top numbers as one independent sequence and find its rule, and then treat the bottom numbers as a completely separate sequence with its own rule. Breaking the fraction apart turns one terrifying problem into two very easy and manageable patterns. This same logic applies when the exam gives you a sequence of letters instead of numbers. The alphabet is just a number series in disguise. The fastest way to solve a letter series is to mentally translate the letters into their corresponding numbers, where the letter A is 1, B is 2, and so on. Once you translate the letters into numbers, you apply all the standard gap finding rules we just discussed, find the next number, and translate it back into a letter for your final answer. Beyond number sequences, this section of the exam introduces advanced logical reasoning, often in the form of ordering or ranking puzzles. You might be asked to arrange 5 people in a line based on a series of confusing clues about who is standing next to whom. The only way to solve these reliably is to draw a simple visual diagram with blank dashes representing the physical spaces. Trying to hold all the moving pieces in your short-term memory is a guaranteed way to get confused and select the wrong answer. When building your diagram for an ordering puzzle, you must always look for the anchor clue first. The anchor clue is the single most restrictive piece of information given, such as stating that John must stand in the exact middle spot. Once you lock John into that middle dash, the rest of the puzzle becomes significantly easier because you have reduced the number of empty spaces. Never start reading the clues in order, but intentionally hunt for the anchor clue that provides absolute certainty. You will also face deductive reasoning questions that use complex conditional statements, often using the words if and then. You must understand that these conditions only flow in one specific direction. If the rule says that if it rains then the grass is wet, you cannot reverse the rule and assume that because the grass is wet it must have rained, because a sprinkler could have caused the wet grass. Recognizing this directional trap will protect you from the most common logical fallacy tested on the exam. These advanced logic questions frequently recycle the syllogism format we discussed in the verbal section, but using absolute nonsense words to remove your real-world bias. You might be told that all blips are blops, and no blops are blaps. You must rely purely on the mental Venn diagram technique, drawing circles inside of other circles to represent these bizarre relationships. Using nonsense words is the test maker's way of forcing you to rely purely on structural logic rather than your intuition. A massive time-saving secret for logical reasoning puzzles is using the process of elimination aggressively. You rarely need to solve the entire puzzle or fill in every single blank dash to find the correct answer. Often, placing just the first 2 pieces of information correctly allows you to eliminate 3 of the 5 answer choices instantly. By constantly checking your partial diagram against the answer choices, you can frequently spot the correct option before you even finish reading all the clues. The exam also tests data sufficiency, where you are asked if the provided clues are actually enough to solve a problem. The trick here is to evaluate each clue completely independently first, pretending the other clue does not exist. Only if both clues fail on their own should you combine them together to see if they solve the problem as a team. This strict, step-by-step evaluation prevents you from accidentally mixing the clues together in your head too early. Managing your time during advanced logical reasoning is the most important skill you can develop for the CCAT. These puzzles are deliberately designed to be time traps that can easily consume 2 or 3 minutes if you get stuck. If you read an ordering puzzle and realize it has more than 4 complex rules, or you cannot find an obvious anchor clue within 20 seconds, you must skip it. Sacrificing one difficult logic puzzle is worth it if it gives you time to answer 4 easy math questions. The most common reason candidates fail these advanced logic questions is simply overthinking the rules. The CCAT is a standardized test, which means the logic used is standard, predictable, and literal. You must stick strictly to the exact rules provided on the screen and never invent new rules or assume hidden meanings. If the text does not explicitly forbid someone from sitting in the first chair, you must assume it is a valid possibility. Stay literal and trust the rules exactly as they are written. Finally, you must build logical stamina because these complex puzzles often appear in the second half of the 15-minute exam when your brain is already exhausted. Fatigue causes you to miss simple anchor clues and make basic subtraction errors in your number sequences. The only way to combat this is to practice doing these specific logic puzzles when you are tired. Building this mental endurance ensures you remain sharp and analytical all the way through to the 50th question. Congratulations on completing this challenging section on advanced logical reasoning and number series. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached practice test right now to lock in these sequence rules and logic diagram techniques. Practicing these specific patterns immediately will wire them into your memory and drastically improve your exam readiness. Remember that the practice test is fully included with this lesson, so take advantage of it to reinforce your active learning. Stay positive, keep up the great work, and I look forward to seeing you in the next section where we will conquer complex abstract reasoning. Welcome to the 5th section of our course, where we will elevate your spatial skills by tackling complex abstract reasoning and visual matrices. In this lesson, you will learn how to fold flat shapes into 3-dimensional objects, analyze multi-variable grid patterns, and decode advanced visual logic. This topic is critically important because these high-difficulty visual puzzles often separate average test scores from the top percentile scores required by elite employers. I am thrilled to share these advanced visual techniques with you so you can solve even the most intimidating matrix grids with absolute calm and clarity. Get ready to push your visual thinking to its highest level. Advanced abstract reasoning moves beyond basic shape matching and tests your ability to process multiple layers of visual information at the exact same time. On the CCAT, these questions present complex shapes that undergo several transformations simultaneously, such as rotating while changing color and shifting position. Employers use these questions to measure your raw cognitive capacity and how well you handle complex, multi-layered data under strict deadlines. While these puzzles can look completely overwhelming at first glance, breaking them down into separate variables makes them completely predictable and easy to solve. One major advanced topic you will encounter is 3-dimensional spatial folding, where you are shown a flattened paper pattern called a net and must predict its folded cube form. A standard cube net consists of 6 connected square faces arranged in various cross shapes or T-shapes. Your job is to mentally fold this flat net into a solid box and identify which arrangement of symbols on the faces is physically possible. The secret to mastering 3D folding is not trying to visualize the entire folding process at once, but using fixed spatial rules. The most powerful rule for solving cube net questions is the opposite face rule. On any flat 6-square net, two faces separated by exactly one intervening face will always end up directly opposite each other on the folded cube. For example, if a star face and a moon face have a single square between them on the flat pattern, they are opposite faces. Because opposite faces can never be seen at the same time on a three-dimensional cube view, you can immediately eliminate any answer choice that shows the star and the moon together. When the opposite face rule is not enough to eliminate all incorrect answers, you must look at how three faces meet at a single corner vertex. Choose three faces that share a common corner on the flat net, and carefully analyze how their internal symbols align at that shared point. For instance, if the point of an arrow on one face points directly at the corner where a circle face touches it, that exact alignment must be preserved on the folded cube. Using corner point alignment allows you to spot incorrect rotations of individual faces almost instantly. Another central element of advanced abstract reasoning is the visual matrix, which presents a 3x3 grid containing 8 shapes and one empty square. A visual matrix is essentially a logical puzzle where rules operate horizontally across rows, vertically down columns, or sometimes both at once. To solve a matrix efficiently, you must choose one direction, usually starting with the top row from left to right, and determine how the first two shapes transform to produce the third shape. Applying that same exact rule to the bottom row reveals the missing piece. A very common rule in visual matrices involves simple shape arithmetic, where shapes are added or subtracted across a row. In an addition matrix, the third box in a row simply combines all the lines and symbols present in the first two boxes. In a subtraction matrix, any symbol present in the first box that also appears in the second box is completely erased in the third box. Looking for added or missing lines across the first row is the quickest way to identify if shape arithmetic is being used. Building on shape arithmetic, matrix puzzles frequently utilize an advanced logic rule known as exclusive OR, or XOR. Under the XOR rule, lines or shapes that appear in both the first and second boxes cancel each other out and disappear in the third box. Conversely, any line that appears in only one of the first two boxes will survive and be drawn in the third box. If you notice that overlapping lines are vanishing as you move across a row, you're looking at an XOR matrix, which makes predicting the final box very straightforward. Rotational progressions are also heavily featured inside visual matrices, where elements turn by a specific angle from box to box. An element might rotate 45 degrees clockwise from the first box to the second, and another 45 degrees from the second to the third. Paying close attention to the exact angle of rotation is critical because test makers love to offer wrong answer choices that turn counterclockwise or rotated by 90 degrees instead. Always measure the direction and exact degree of turn across the top row before scanning the answer options. The most difficult visual matrices on the CCAT involve multivariable tracking, where 3 or 4 different elements change independently inside every single cell. For example, a square might be moving clockwise, a central dot might be changing shading from black to white, and an outer border might be adding new lines. Trying to process all these moving parts simultaneously creates instant visual confusion. To maintain complete control, you must train yourself to focus on only one single variable at a time while ignoring everything else on the screen. Using this isolation method, you select the easiest variable first, such as the shading of the central dot, and track its rule across the grid. If the shading rule dictates that the final dot must be solid black, you immediately scan the 5 answer options and eliminate any option containing a white or striped dot. With those options eliminated, you move to the second variable, such as the rotation of the outer border, and apply its rule to eliminate more options. This step-by-step elimination method often reveals the correct answer without requiring you to solve the remaining variables. Shading and fill patterns follow strict logical progressions that you can decode with ease once you know what to look for. Common shading rules include cycling sequentially through a set order of fills, such as moving from solid black to diagonal stripes to solid white and back to black. Alternatively, shading might represent a percentage, where an object becomes progressively darker as you move across the row. Treating shading as a predictable sequence allows you to determine the correct fill pattern in just a few seconds. You will also encounter advanced odd one-out questions involving abstract geometric shapes that share complex structural features. In these problems, simple line counting is often not enough, and you must analyze topological properties instead. Topology refers to fundamental geometric characteristics, such as whether a shape forms a completely closed loop or contains an open gap. An odd one-out puzzle might show 5 intricate line drawings, where 4 form fully enclosed spaces and 1 contains a microscopic opening, making it the odd one out. Another topological trick involves counting the number of enclosed regions created by intersecting lines within a shape. For example, a figure 8 creates exactly 2 distinct enclosed regions, while a triangle intersected by a single line creates 3 enclosed regions. When looking at abstract geometric sets, quickly count the internal spaces formed inside each figure. You will often find that 4 of the options contain an even number of internal regions, while the single outlier contains an odd number, instantly revealing the correct choice. Test makers frequently attempt to slow you down by adding visual clutter and optical noise to advanced matrix grids. They might overlay background grid lines, fill surrounding spaces with irrelevant dots, or use confusing patterns designed to make your eyes jump around. You must train your brain to filter out this visual noise by actively searching for structural anchor points that remain constant. Ignore the background decorations completely and focus purely on the moving core elements that drive the logical pattern. In certain complex matrix grids, the logical rule does not move horizontally across rows or vertically down columns, but moves diagonally across the grid instead. In a diagonal matrix, the shape in the top left corner is identical to or directly transforms into the shape in the middle cell and the bottom right cell. If you analyze the rows and columns and find absolutely no logical connection, immediately shift your focus to checking the diagonal lines. Recognizing a diagonal pattern saves you from getting stuck in a frustrating visual dead end. Advanced abstract questions can also hide quantitative properties directly within visual shapes. You might be shown a series of shapes where the actual pattern is based on the total sum of internal angles, or the ratio of black surface area to white surface area. If a shape has 3 sides, 4 sides, and 5 sides across a sequence, the pattern is simply the addition of geometry sides disguised as a visual puzzle. Treating complex shapes as hidden numbers allows you to solve abstract puzzles using basic math. Because advanced abstract reasoning requires intense concentration, your visual focus will naturally decay as you work through these complex grids. High visual stress can cause shapes to bleed together, leading to careless mistakes on questions you actually know how to solve. To keep your brain performing at its peak, practice the 2-second reset technique between heavy visual problems. Briefly close your eyes or look at a plane surface for 2 seconds to reset your visual field before tackling the next abstract matrix. High-speed elimination remains your most powerful tool when navigating difficult abstract questions under strict time limits. Never spend time proving why a correct answer is completely right if you have already proven that the 4 alternative options are completely wrong. The moment you eliminate 4 choices using your isolated variable checks, select the remaining option immediately and move on to the next question. Trusting your elimination process keeps your momentum strong and protects your precious exam time. Congratulations on completing this advanced section on complex abstract reasoning and visual matrices. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached practice test right now to test your new 3D folding and matrix techniques. Working through these challenging visual questions immediately will dramatically improve your pattern retention and guarantee your true readiness for test day. Remember that the practice test is fully included with this lesson, so take advantage of it to master these high-level skills. Keep up this incredible dedication to active learning, and I will see you in the final section where we bring everything together with high-yield test strategies. Welcome to the 6th and final section of our complete CCAT preparation course, where we will focus entirely on high-yield test strategies and time management. In this final lesson, you will learn the exact tactics used by top-scoring candidates to navigate the extreme time pressure of the exam and maximize their point total. This topic is vitally important because knowing the material is only half the battle, while knowing how to physically take the test is what truly secures a passing score. I am excited to share these battle-tested methods with you, so you can walk into your assessment with absolute confidence and a clear game plan. Get ready to transform your raw knowledge into a highly efficient test-taking machine. The single most defining characteristic of the CCAT is its brutal time limit, giving you only 15 minutes to complete 50 questions. This works out to an average of exactly 18 seconds per question, which means you cannot afford to hesitate or double-check your work. You must completely abandon the perfectionist mindset that you learned in school, where getting every single question right was the goal. On this exam, your new goal is volume, meaning you want to expose yourself to as many easy questions as possible before the clock runs out. Adopting this speed-focused mindset is the foundation of your entire test strategy. Because the CCAT does not penalize you for wrong answers, your absolute most important rule is to never leave a question blank. Leaving a question unanswered guarantees you 0 points, while blindly guessing gives you a 20% chance of accidentally earning a point. If the timer is counting down its final 10 seconds and you still have 5 unanswered questions, you must rapidly click a single letter for all remaining bubbles. A string of quick guesses at the very end could easily bump your final score up by 2 or 3 points, which is often the difference between failing and passing. To maximize your score, you must master the art of the strategic skip, which means intentionally skipping hard questions to find easy ones. The CCAT mixes all difficulty levels together, meaning question 45 might actually be much easier than question 12. If you stare at a complex math word problem for 30 seconds without knowing the first step, you're actively stealing time away from easy vocabulary questions waiting at the end of the test. You must ruthlessly skip any question that looks like a time trap, trusting that you will pick up faster points later. When you decide to skip a question, you must still apply the guessing rule immediately before moving to the next screen. Take 1 second to select a random answer choice, ideally your favorite guessing letter, and then move forward without looking back. This protects you in case you run out of time at the very end of the test and cannot navigate back to fill in the blanks. By guessing as you skip, you ensure that every single question you pass has at least a chance of earning you a point. Your favorite guessing letter is a predefined answer choice, like the letter C, that you commit to using for every blind guess. Using the exact same letter for every blind guess is statistically proven to be more effective than randomly zigzagging your guesses across the board. If you guess C 5 times in a row, the laws of probability suggest that you will eventually hit a correct answer. Choosing your guessing letter right now removes the tiny cognitive burden of deciding which letter to pick when you are panicking on test day. While blind guessing is a necessary backup plan, educated guessing using the process of elimination is always your primary weapon. Every single time you eliminate a mathematically impossible or logically flawed answer choice, you drastically increase your odds of guessing correctly. If a word problem asks for a percentage, you can often instantly eliminate any answer choices that are negative numbers or fractions. Turning a 1 in 5 guess into a 1 in 3 guess takes only a few seconds, but it significantly boosts your overall point yield over the course of 50 questions. Time awareness is critical, but obsessively checking the clock will actually destroy your focus and waste precious seconds. You should plan to check the timer only at specific checkpoints, rather than glancing at it after every single question. A great strategy is to check the clock every 10 questions to ensure you are averaging about 3 minutes per block of 10. This checkpoint system keeps you on pace without the constant, anxiety-inducing distraction of a ticking countdown timer burning in your peripheral vision. You can also leverage the predictable structure of the CCAT to group similar questions together in your mind, which reduces cognitive friction. The brain takes a few seconds to switch gears from a spatial shape rotation task to a complex math equation. When you encounter a series of verbal analogies, try to answer them quickly in a batch while your brain is already warmed up for language processing. Embracing the rhythm of the question types helps you maintain a smooth, fast-paced momentum throughout the 15 minutes. Reading speed is a massive factor on this assessment, especially during the long word problems and logical syllogisms. The best way to read faster is to stop vocalizing the words in your head, a habit known as subvocalization, which limits your reading speed to your speaking speed. Train yourself to visually scan sentences for keywords and numbers rather than reading every single word aloud in your mind. Scanning for the essential data points allows you to process paragraphs twice as fast, giving you a massive advantage over other candidates. Scratch paper is allowed and highly recommended during the exam, but you must use it with extreme discipline to avoid wasting time. Do not write down the entire word problem, and do not draw elaborate diagrams unless absolutely necessary for an ordering puzzle. Your scratch paper should only contain the raw numbers and the basic formula you need to perform the final calculation. Keeping your notes incredibly minimal prevents you from getting bogged down in messy handwriting and keeps your eyes focused on the computer screen. Before you even start the timer, you should use your scratch paper to write down your alphabet number key and your common percentage fractions. Writing down that A equals 1, B equals 2, and 1/4 equals 25% takes about 30 seconds before the test begins. Having this cheat sheet readily available means you will not have to rely on your working memory when you encounter a stressful letter series or fraction problem later. Offloading this basic data onto paper frees up your brain power for actual problem solving. Test anxiety is a very real physical response that can cause your mind to go completely blank, ruining all your hard preparation. The most effective way to combat test anxiety is through controlled box breathing during the first few seconds of the exam. Breathe in deeply for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4 seconds to physically lower your heart rate. Taking just 12 seconds to stabilize your nervous system at the start will prevent a massive adrenaline spike and keep your logical brain engaged. You must also mentally prepare yourself for the overwhelming feeling of not finishing the exam, because almost nobody actually finishes all 50 questions. The average candidate answers only 30 to 35 questions, and answering 40 questions correctly is considered an exceptionally elite score. Understanding that perfection is literally impossible will help you remain calm when the timer reaches 0 and you still have 5 questions left. Measure your success by how efficiently you worked, not by whether you reached the final screen. It is critical to take your practice tests in an environment that perfectly mimics the actual testing conditions. You must enforce the strict 15-minute time limit every single time you practice, without ever pausing the timer to grab a drink or check your phone. Sit at a clean desk, use only one piece of scratch paper, and use a standard computer mouse rather than a trackpad. Training in test-like conditions ensures that the physical experience of taking the exam feels completely normal and comfortable on the big day. After taking a practice test, your review session is actually more important than the test itself, because that is where the real learning happens. Do not just look at your final score and move on, but ruthlessly analyze every single question you got wrong or guessed on. Figure out if you made a math error, fell for a verbal trap, or simply ran out of time because you spent too long on a puzzle. Identifying exactly why you missed a question prevents you from repeating that exact same mistake on the real assessment. You should also review the questions you got right, especially the ones that took you more than 30 seconds to solve. Ask yourself if there was a faster shortcut, a better estimation trick, or a quicker elimination method you could have used instead. Finding a 5-second shortcut on a question you already know how to solve is just as valuable as learning how to answer a completely new question type. Efficiency is the ultimate currency on the CCAT, and you must constantly hunt for faster ways to arrive at the correct answer. In the days leading up to your real assessment, do not try to cram new math formulas or advanced logic rules into your brain. Cramming creates mental fatigue, and you need your brain to be fully rested and sharp for the high-speed processing required by the CCAT. Instead, focus purely on light review, reviewing your scratch paper cheat sheet, and practicing your breathing exercises. Treat the day before the test like a resting day before a major athletic event, prioritizing good sleep and mental relaxation above everything else. When you finally sit down to take the real CCAT, remember that you are fully prepared and armed with the best strategies available. You know how to track visual matrices, how to decode number series, and how to rapidly eliminate wrong answers across all question types. Trust your training, stick strictly to your time checkpoints, and confidently skip any question that threatens your momentum. You have built a massive toolkit of shortcuts, and now it is time to deploy them efficiently and secure the score you deserve. Congratulations on completing this final section and the entire CCAT preparation course. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached full-length practice test right now to simulate the real 15-minute exam experience. Taking this timed practice test will solidify your new pacing strategies, improve your overall retention, and guarantee your ultimate exam readiness. Remember that this comprehensive practice test is fully included with this lesson, So take advantage of it to measure your incredible progress. Embrace this active learning challenge, approach your exam with total confidence, and I wish you the absolute best of luck in your career journey.